Hello, my name is Bob Ingliss.
And I'm Andrea Menousek, and we're from the New Jersey Symphony.
Welcome to your new training video for Orchestra U.
Today we're going to talk about tricky intervals, or as I like to call this training, why do I keep missing that note?
As musicians, when we run across a difficult passage, there is usually at least one tricky interval at the heart of the problem. There are a number of reasons why it might be tricky for you, ranging from it's difficult to hear to it might be technically challenging.
An interval is the space between two notes. It can be stacked as in a chord, or melodic as in an arpeggio. As orchestral players preparing to make a video for the Glinka, we're concerned with the melodic kind of interval. Bob and I have put together a list of techniques that you can use to tackle any difficult passage that may be challenging for you. And Bob has found a tricky passage in the Glinka to demonstrate how to work on a difficult passage with tricky intervals.
Yes, there's a tricky passage in Ruslan and Ludmila that gets traded off amongst all the woodwinds. I always have to review it before a rehearsal or a performance. It involves some tricky fingerwork and rhythmic precision. A knowledge of the mechanics of the instrument doesn't hurt either in order to play all these tricky intervals cleanly. I work with a metronome in order to make sure my fingers move at just the right moment and to get the dotted rhythms right in the pocket.
And could you play that passage for us?
Absolutely. And I'm going to play that again.
And could you play that passage for us slowly? And could you slur it? I don't know about you, but playing a passage slowly gives me time to understand which part of the passage is most difficult. And slurring makes me keep my air moving through the passage. I always say if you can slur it, you can tongue it.
I totally agree. And I'm going to put on my metronome for this too.
After playing it slowly and slurring it, did you notice which intervals were the most tricky for you? Were you able to notice why they were tricky? I have to mention here as well that I always need to pay attention to whether the notes are centered and in tune.
Well, I really noticed a couple of intervals. The first one was the A to the C sharp that goes over the break, is always difficult and is kind of akin to a string change on a violin. The second interval was from the G to the B flat.
Great. So now that you've found the most tricky intervals and have played them for us, can you try playing them with some different rhythms?
Sure. On that last one, the G to the B flat, an A natural tends to kind of like to poke its head through between that interval.
Yeah, that's like on the horn when we catch partials in the middle of a slur. We always have to be very careful about our internal timing, our internal subdivision, so that we move just at the right moment and not catch that extra partial.
Yeah, and sometimes I'll practice an interval like that with a glissando. It makes me feel closer to the instrument. I keep my fingers really close to the keys and I become very sensitive to them, and I have to support like crazy.
Those are great exercises. Now that you've isolated the intervals and explored them, can you expand out in both directions to include the notes before and afterwards to give these intervals context? Because it's never just the interval itself. Can you include different ways of exploring the relationships between all of these notes?
Yes, and as a matter of fact, Claudio Rao, the great Chilean pianist, never practiced scales or arpeggios, but he made his own exercises out of the music that he had to perform. And believe me, in a Brahms concerto, there's plenty of material to make etudes.
Ah, that's great. I love that.
Now we'll notice on the first interval, it's an A to C sharp. Those are the first two notes of a root position A major triad. And that actually is in the music. With a D sharp passing tone between the C sharp and the E. And then with a G to the B flat, that interval is preceded and followed by an A natural, and we can do all kinds of things with that.
So thank you, Bob. This is a really helpful way to practice a difficult interval in passage.
Thank you for helping me to practice it.
More than happy to do that. So let's review.
When you find a difficult passage,
Play it slowly and with a metronome.
slur it,
Identify the most tricky interval.
isolate that interval, and play around with it. Use different rhythms.
Notice what is making it tricky for you. Is it a fingering, or do you need more air or bow? Also, are these notes centered and in tune?
And then expand out in both directions and try to find the context for that interval.
Applying these practice tips to your tricky intervals should help you master any difficult passage.
We hope you find this useful and enjoy applying these ideas.
As always, don't forget to have fun. And happy
Happy practicing.
practicing.